Good afternoon. We continue business today with portfolio questions on government, business and constitutional relations. First question from Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how long it keeps electronic and written records of policy advice to ministers.
Minister Graham Day.
Officer, confirmation of the retention and disposal schedules that are applied to Scottish Government information is provided within our records management plan, which is available on the Scottish Government website. However, in the interest of being helpful to my friend Mr Mountain, I can advise him that any information held in the Government's electronic records system and the time it remains open for before being closed and whether the file is destroyed, archived or reviewed is the subject of a defined number of years according to the nature of the file. And in relation to policy advice, I understand the period is for up to 15 years.
Edward Mountain. And I thank the Minister for that reply. Can the Minister therefore confirm how long the Scottish Government keeps electronic and written records of ministers' notes? Is it for the same period of time?
Graham Day.
Presiding Officer, this is an issue that Mr Mountain and the Conservatives have misguidedly been focusing on over the last few days. So perhaps it would be useful for me to explain once and for all how this works. The policy used for handling notes in ministerial offices predates this government. It was introduced in 2004-05 by the then Scottish Executive. It was not introduced by the current First Minister, and there has been no change under this First Minister in the handling of handwritten notes, with the practice the same as under her predecessors. From 2004-05 onwards, it was agreed that responses from ministers are relayed by ministerial offices to the relevant policy teams who are responsible for maintaining the official record. It is not the responsibility of ministerial offices to keep the official record, and the Scottish Government is confident we comply with all records management requirements.
Question number 2, David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it's had with the UK Government about the replacement of European Structural Fund support after Brexit.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Russell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The UK Government has committed to rolling out a successor programme to the European Structural Funds post-EU exit called the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Following initial discussions in late 2018, early 2019, the UK Government failed to provide any clarity on the details of this fund. That is still the case. The Scottish Government will continue to press the UK Government on this matter. Against this background of uncertainty, however, this government is currently undertaking a consultation to ensure stakeholders are empowered to shape the development of the Scottish approach to any potential replacement.
David Stewart.
Presiding Officer, in any future negotiations, what guarantees can be given that the Highlands and Islands will continue to have geographic disparities recognised, specifically remoteness, sparsity and the islands dimension?
Cabinet Secretary.
The member will be aware of my own commitment to those issues, particularly given the constituency I represent. There have been no commitments from the UK Government, however. There has been an indication from the UK Government in its only statement on this that they would be endeavouring to use the monies to support the UK industrial strategy. That does not seem to me to be responsive to the needs of rural Scotland. Yesterday, Presiding Officer, I met with the Scottish Cities Alliance, and the convener of Highland Council was on the phone at that meeting. There was a view that there needed to be a very strong Scottish dimension, that the flexibility that existed within the Structural Funds programme should continue to exist. And of course, the Scottish Government has made it clear that the devolved settlement needs to be recognised within any new system of distributing those funds. The Scottish Government looks forward to views in the consultation we're undertaking. I'd welcome Mr Stewart's participation in that, in giving his views. We will bring forward our own proposals. But as with many things on Brexit, in the end, this will depend upon the UK Government's decision. And so far, they appear mired in confusion and without any ability to say what they want to achieve or how they're going to achieve it.
Question number 3, Bill Bowman.
An update on the progress of the Referendum Scotland Bill.
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm pleased to say that the Referendum Scotland Bill was backed by MSPs at the Stage 1 debate last week and will now continue to Stage 2.
Bill Bowman.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that very to-the-point response. In September, the SNP government announced plans for 13 bills, but now these have been moved aside in favour of one that wasn't announced, the IndyRef 2 bill, which they are trying to push through before the end of this year. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell me when did the SNP decide that legislation on animal welfare, rural support, hate crime, warm homes was less important than its IndyRef2 obsession?
Cabinet Secretary.
I presume that the member is misinformed, because I'm quite sure he wouldn't wish to actually say something to this chamber that wasn't true. The legislative programme remains as it was announced within the programme for government. That is the situation and will continue to be the situation. The pressure upon the legislative programme does not come from decisions of the Scottish Government in terms of additional bills. It comes from the utter chaos at Westminster. And the fact that I believe I am right in saying that not a single bill has been brought forward for matters other than Brexit in the last 6 months. There may have been 1 or 2 minor aspects of legislation. Westminster is in utter chaos with Brexit. And the right thing for Mr Bowman to do would be to reflect upon the complete failure of the Tories in government in the UK. And stop trying to cast aspersions on the Scottish Government, which is delivering its legislative programme precisely as it promised.
Question number 4, Bill Kidd.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what impact the UK general election will have on the business of the Scottish Government.
Minister Graham Day.
So during the period leading up to the UK general election, by long-standing convention, the Scottish Government will normally avoid making any announcements that could influence or may reasonably be perceived to influence the UK election campaign. The Scottish Government continues, however, to take forward business necessary to ensure the proper and effective functioning of government and public service. The Scottish Ministers continue to carry out their functions supported by the civil service in the usual way. The same principles apply to the UK Government during the period prior to any Scottish election.
Bill Kidd.
I thank the Minister for that response. Both the public and parliamentarians are well aware of Brexit's extensive drain on public resources. Does the Minister agree that the UK Government's delayed budget, which is a consequence of the upcoming Brexit-focused election, will exacerbate these pressures and negatively affect this devolved administration?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is working extensively to prepare for the potential consequences of an EU exit. As of March 2019, around 500 full-time equivalent staff in the Scottish Government were engaged in the EU exit-related work. The Scottish Government is prioritising activity in areas that will be heavily impacted by Brexit, most notably the economy, transport, food and drink, medicines, agriculture and the rural economy. The 2019-20 budget had been prepared on the assumption that the UK will leave the EU with a deal and an orderly transition. Difficult decisions on prioritisation, very difficult decisions, would need to be taken should we leave without a deal.
Question number 5, Tom Mason.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what advice it has received from the Permanent Secretary regarding Scottish Government's legislative priorities for the remainder of this parliamentary session.
Minister Graham.
Presiding Officer, with the support of the Civil Service, the Scottish Government continually assesses its future legislative priorities. Subject to the risk of an unwelcome diversion of resources caused by Brexit, we remain committed to bringing before Parliament the ambitious legislative programme set out by the First Minister in this year's programme for government.
Tom Mason.
May I thank you for that response. Papers obtained by the Scottish Conservatives show civil servants have deprioritised policy areas to work on the SNP's IndyRef2 plans. When will this SNP government put schools, hospitals, policing ahead of its IndyRef2 obsession and stop blaming the Westminster government on all their problems?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, no Scottish Government bills have had to be reprioritised as a result of work on issues relating to independence. By contrast, 5 bills and 38 SSIs had to be deferred earlier this year because of the disruption caused as a result of having to make no-deal preparations.
Question number 6, Keith Brown.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its no-deal Brexit planning.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Russell.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government undertook extensive preparation for a potential no-deal exit from the EU on the 31st of October, as set out in the Overview of No-Deal Preparations published on the 8th of October. Although an extension to Article 50 has been agreed, as a responsible government, we will continue to do everything we can to prepare until the threat of a no-deal is finally ruled out. We will continue to keep Parliament updated. However, it will simply not be possible to mitigate all the aspects of leaving the EU without a deal, should that transpire.
Keith Brown.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer? But as he'll be aware, Tory government ministers are on the record ruling out extending the transition period past 2020. And under the terms of Boris Johnson's deal, if no FTA is agreed by the end of 2020 and no extension is in place, we will effectively face again the cliff edge of a hugely disastrous no-deal Brexit with all the damage to jobs and livelihoods it will cause. Will the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the only way to guarantee that a no-deal Brexit is permanently taken off the table is for Scotland to become an equal and independent member of the European Union?
Unsurprisingly, I agree wholeheartedly with what you have said. That is the only way, what the member has said. It is the only way that we can move from this constant uncertainty into a certainty about the future. There is a Conservative voice sort of making noises on the other side of the chamber. The Conservatives make noises about this because they know the inevitability of ensuring the Conservatives may try and talk me down, but I will continue to assert the inevitability of a democratic right to allow the people of Scotland to choose their future. Yeah. That is absolutely unanswerable in terms of democracy. And the Tories can shout and argue as much as they will. They are not Democrats if they do not accept that. Let me make another point here in terms of what the EU position is. There's a very interesting contribution made in the last 24 hours by Phil Hogan, who is about to become the Commissioner on Trade and with responsibility for the trade negotiations in the UK. And he's been very clear about both the timescale and what is expected. On timescale, he has said that a deal could be done within 12 months. But it can only be done in 12 months if there is an absolute acceptance, complete and permanent acceptance by the UK of the level playing field. And as we know, there is a huge reluctance by the UK to sign on for that. And now that the Tory party is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Brexit party, there will be a refusal, an absolute refusal to do so. Yep. So we're in for a very rocky ride indeed, I have to say. And that is another reason why Scotland should choose independence.
Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government for an update on its planning in relation to potential medicine shortages as a result of a catastrophic no-deal exit from our European neighbours.
Cabinet Secretary.
There are very serious concerns regarding the issue of medicine supplies, and they have to be taken very seriously indeed. There's a lot of work that has been done by the Scottish Government in making sure that there is a continuity of supply. But nothing can ever be completely guaranteed. And in these circumstances, we will have to make sure that we keep under review, for example, of all the issues that are involved in stockpiling medicines, all the issues that are involved, as they were in the no-deal preparations, in ensuring that the priority goods are given priority, and all the considerations we have for a range of other issues. It is utterly irresponsible of any government, and the UK government stands condemned for this, to create the circumstances in which people who are vulnerable, who are suffering from illnesses, are nervous about the provision of the core medicines that they require. That is unforgivable. And any UK minister or any Scottish Tory that has supported that should hang their heads in shame.
Question number 7, Sarah Boyack.
To ask the Scottish Government how it plans to mitigate the impact that difficulties in recruiting EU citizens as a result of Brexit will have on the staffing of care services.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, EU citizens are playing a vital role across our public services, including social care. That's why we launched the Stay in Scotland campaign, why we'll continue to argue for free movement of people. Retaining and attracting the right people into the social services sector, raising the status of social care as a profession, is key to delivering quality, sustainable services. We've taken action to protect our social care services, including paying the real living wage to adult care workers. Under our National Health and Social Care Workforce Plan Part 2, co-published with COSLA, we're working with partners, including care providers and COSLA, to support recruitment and retention into the social care workforce. This includes work in progress to deliver a national recruitment campaign in early 2020, which will promote adult social care as a meaningful, valued and rewarding career choice. The campaign will link to the Scottish Social Service Council's New Carers website, launched in September this year, which contains inspirational case studies and tools to help staff build a career in the sector.
Sarah Boyack.
Can I thank the Minister for sharing my concerns about the impact of uncertainty and worries about the loss of rights for EU citizens who work in Scotland in this sector. He has acknowledged that there is work being done. Can I ask him to redouble those efforts, because we need a specific plan to ensure that we retain those staff, given the demographic pressures highlighted by our Local Government and Communities Committee only last month in our budget representations, the important role played by citizens in those services, but today's worrying survey by Unison that 90% of social workers are considering leaving their jobs, that we potentially do face a crisis across health and social care that really needs everybody to step in and make sure that we get the support for those staff and that we look at the real living wage and much more beyond.
Thank the member for that supplementary question. She is asking very important questions. Now, she and I will not entirely agree on the issue of independence, I'm sure, but even a devolution of migration would be a step forward in these circumstances and would allow us to do things we can't do now. We are very aware there are a number of factors that bear down upon the workforce in these circumstances. The loss of rights is certainly one of them. The value of the pound is another one, and sometimes that is a major factor. The worries about long-term sustainability of employment, worries about the welcome people receive. And there's a variety of things that can and are being done. I commend the work being done by my colleague Jean Freeman in offering reassurance to health and social care workforce. I commend the work being done by Ben McPherson, and this work takes place across government in terms of working with EU nationals, and we will continue to undertake that type of work to make sure that the workforce from other EU countries is valued, that this is an area in which we want to encourage people to stay and contribute, and we will do our very best to make sure that that will happen. But controlling migration would be an easier tool and a more effective one.
Question number 8, Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what analysis it has undertaken of the impact of the UK Government's Brexit deal on Scotland's economy.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, on the 30th of October, the Scottish Government published our assessment of the revised withdrawal agreement and the political declaration. This set out that a free trade agreement of the type the UK Government wants to negotiate finds that Scottish GDP is estimated to be 6.1% lower by 2030 compared to continued EU membership. This equates to a cost to each person in Scotland of £1,600. Further details can be found on the Scottish Government's website.
Fulton McGregor.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. The Brexit deal will be devastating for Scotland, not least in my constituency, which receives tens of millions of pounds in EU funding to help small businesses grow, support those in poverty and tackle unemployment. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that any replacement of this vital funding must have the input from those in Scotland? And how is this Government facilitating those voices are heard regarding such important resources?
Cabinet Secretary.
I do agree. In an answer to Mr Stewart, I indicated that the Shared Prosperity Fund is a considerable worry to this Government. I first discussed the future of this. I think the fund was announced in the 2017 Tory Party manifesto, and I first discussed this with James Brokenshire when he was Communities Secretary, and that wasn't yesterday. Nothing has happened since. There's been no indication, really, of how this fund might move forward. We have 5 red lines which are very important to this. Scotland should not lose out financially compared with the current level of funding it receives. The devolution settlement must be respected. The UK Government must not attempt to take back powers that the Scottish Government has rightfully executed to date in this area. The Scottish Government must be an equal partner in development of the Shared Prosperity Fund. The current level of flexibility in allocation of funds should not be reduced, and the replacement scheme should be operational in time to be implemented in early 2021, so stakeholders do not suffer difficulties as a result of funding gaps. Now, in all those areas, we know little more than we knew 2 years ago. But the position we're taking is the same position as the government in Wales has taken, and I am increasingly worried about the timescale more than anything else, because it does look almost impossible to meet that timescale. The UK government, after this election, if they are still in power, and let us profoundly hope that they are not, but if they are still in power, then in these circumstances they have to pay attention to this, because many organisations and individuals in Scotland will feel a severe draft if this is not going forward.
Thank you very much, and that concludes questions on government business and constitutional relations. We're going to turn now to the next item, which is a debate on motion 19851 in the name of Ivan McKee on implications of the imposition of US tariffs on Scottish products. I would encourage all members who wish to contribute in this debate to press their request to speak buttons.